Let's have a look at an easy example how claims transformation and validation works. So again, we have our simple, boilerplate code here. One part of the application sets the principal, and as you can see, we simply fetch the current user that's sitting in front of the machine, that's me, and set it on thread.current principal. Now, when we look at, well, we can actually do that. Let's have a breakpoint here and go here. And once we've set that, we can have a look at thread.current principal. And you see it's a Windows principal. And if we look at the identity, there's a Windows identity, and that basically is a claims identity. And it has claims. Okay, so we can see there are all these group SIDs and so on and so forth. So in most cases, your application won't care about these things. Yeah, it might care about who is the name of the guy, but they typically don't care too much about the Windows groups you're a member of. What they do care about is maybe that this group membership results in a certain role in your application, or this group membership might result in certain capabilities in your application, but they don't typically care about these long strings here. And this is where claims transformation and validation comes into play. So that gives you a central logic that can parse the incoming identity and turn it into something our application cares about. So how would that work? Now, as I said, we can add a class that derives from Claims Authentication Manager. So let's call that Claims Transformer. And we derive from Claims Authentication Manager. And there's this method called override authenticate. And basically, they pass me in the incoming principal. I can do whatever I want, and I return another principal. So on this side here, that would be what's going out, the application oriented principal, and what's coming in is more like the raw conversion from the token to the principal. So typical steps would be like validate the incoming claims. So for example, we need the name of the user. So we can say var name equals incoming principal.identity.name. And then maybe we want to make sure, if something is wrong here, string dot is null or white space name, then something is wrong. And maybe, or quite certainly, your application may not function correctly if it doesn't have the name of the user. So that gives you the chance to throw an exception, for example, and abort the request. Name claim is missing, something like that. Okay, and then typically, what is a typical approach is that you now take all the information that, or you find out all the information you need about that user by querying the claims collection. Maybe you look at the SIDs and translate them into group names to make a decision, or maybe you're working based on SIDs, whatever. But at some point, the typical job is that you create a new principal that only holds the information the user cares about. So, let's do something like if name equals least privilege Dominick. That simulates the database lookup. Then, well, we know something. He lives in Heidelberg. That is in our database. So that means we have a castle in Heidelberg. So we find out more about that user. As I said, this is just a silly example how you would query a database to find out things like the purchase limit or his email address, things like that. Okay, so now we can create a new principal. So let's create a new set of claims. Have a new claim with a claim type of name and pass in the name, and a new claim my claims has castle. And that is has castle to string. Okay, and then we can create a new claims principal with a new claims identity, pass in those claims and set the authentication type custom. Okay, so the logic is this: we look for the required claims. If something is missing, we error out, and then we tell them, hey, now create that application claim so our application gets what it needs. And this application obviously needs to know if I have access to a castle. Okay, now since this claims authentication manager is a standard .NET component, you can also configure that via the configuration file. You see there's a new section in .NET called System.IdentityModel, and if I add this here, System.IdentityModel, you see there's a thing called Claims Authentication Manager, and you can specify in which type is the identity validation claims transformation logic implemented for this application. So let's have a look. We are in a namespace called Claims Transformation Demo. The class is called Claims Transformer. Okay, and the assembly is called Claims Transformation Demo as well. Like this. And now in our low-level plumbing code here, what we would do before we actually set the principal, we take the incoming principal and send it to the claims transformation logic, and what comes out of that gets set on the principal. So we would basically do this, and then thread.currentPrincipal equals, and then there's a class here called federated authentication dot federation configuration dot service identity configuration dot claims authentication manager, and here we call the authenticate method and pass in the principal, and the outcome of the transformation would be set on thread.currentPrincipal. So what does there's a parameter missing. The first one is a so-called resource. So that basically gives you the ability to add some sort of context into the claims transformation process. In ASP.NET, for example, they pass in the URL that the client tries to access. So maybe you have different transformation logic based on the resource that he's trying to access. We don't use that here, so we can just pass in none. Okay, so this is running. So now if we run the code, we should see that our class gets invoked. Yeah, indeed. Okay, so we extract the name, make sure it isn't empty, and this is Dominic, he has a castle, so we return the claims. And yeah, from that point on thread.currentPrincipal, now our transformed principal is set. Let's validate that. Yeah, so we have one name claim and one has castle claim. So from that point on, the rest of your application will not see those technical Windows claims anymore, but the things that make sense for the application. And that's the whole idea of claims validation and transformation.